At an international conference in South Korea, an eminent linguist turned to delegates from one country and he said, in 500 years, there'll only be two languages left in the world. English, because it is so powerful. Welsh, because you lot are so stubborn. Now, I'd prefer the term resilient myself, rather than stubborn. But what I want to talk to you about today, and what I want to tell you about today, is the story of the Welsh language and of our resilience, but also share some of the learnings and some of those opportunities that we've had, particularly in the education system and in the further and higher education systems, so that we can learn from each other and see what lessons that people can learn from our experience, what we can share with you. So, what we're going to be talking about today is Wales and the Welsh language in context, the Welsh in the 20th century, and particularly language revitalisation through schools and education. And then moving on particularly to the work that I've been doing in the field of higher and further education. So, most of you are familiar with where Wales is, maybe, I hope. Some of you helpfully told me last night that it's somewhere in size between Rhode Island and Connecticut, which was a level of information about American states that was beyond me. But here is Wales in red in this in the United Kingdom here. But then you've got a large blue arrow to a place called Catraeth, Catterick. And from Catterick comes the first written Welsh poetry we have records of from the 6th century. So we have written records of the Welsh language that go back 1,500 years. Gwyr a aeth Catraeth oedd fraith ei chi. From a time when most of that island spoke Welsh. Over time, we were pushed, encouraged, whatever words you want to choose, by the English westwards, and this is now our home on the western seaboard of Britain. There are about 3 million people live in Wales, and about 500,000 Welsh speakers today. That's where we are in terms of the Welsh language, which seems pretty good, you'd assume, half a million Welsh speakers. But think for a second about that resilience, and think back to the history of Wales. In 1282, Wales was conquered and became part of what was to become the British state. In 1536, the Welsh language was banned from public administration. Yeah? So over almost 500 years ago, Welsh was officially banned. But we are still here, rili yma o hyd. But Welsh survived and Welsh developed because of its relevance in certain areas of life. And what you see behind me there on the left is one of the first Bibles in Welsh. That's an original 1620 Bible that I had the privilege to hold 2 weeks ago. I was a bit nervous. I didn't want to turn a page in case I ripped out a page from this very ancient and very important Bible to us as Welsh people. But the Welsh language survived through text and through literature. And by the end of the 19th century, it was still widely spoken. And on the right, you'll see something called the Welsh knot. The Welsh knot was a block of wood which would hang around the necks of school children. And if you spoke Welsh in school, you would be presented with a Welsh knot. And whichever child had that Welsh knot on, at the end of the day, they would be caned. So the Welsh language was literally beaten out of the children of Wales in the late 19th century. It reflected the lower class status of the Welsh language. That was the context in which we begin to look at the 20th century. And these, for me, are the key graphs, if you like, the key stats about the Welsh language in the 20th century. Let's begin by looking at the left of this graph. What you see there is the pattern of development in terms of adults speaking Welsh. So if you go back to 100 years, you see more or less about half of the Welsh population speaking Welsh. By 2011, you're down to about 15%. So we ask ourselves, is this a language not only in decline, but in terminal decline? What I want to share with you today is the fact that it isn't actually in terminal decline, and we look at this graph on the right-hand side of the presentation here. And what we see here are the figures for children speaking Welsh up to 25, actually, those who can be in education. And again, you'll see the pattern of decline. But then, from about the 1980s onwards, you see a growth. And you see clear development, so much so that by now, the largest percentage age groups who speak Welsh are the young, not the old. And that's one clear sign for me of the health and the future of the language, is where you have those young people speaking Welsh. So how's that all come about? So in the 20th century, you have the background of the Welsh not. You have Welsh as a second class. You have Welsh as a second class language. But there is still some Welsh medium education going on. And in the early 20th century, like Pwn and Haleʻōlelo, you see some Welsh medium nursery groups being established. So you begin right at your feet. You begin at the beginning of life, where you give that education in Welsh through nursery groups to begin with. And the first Welsh primary school was established in 1939, a private school to start, where people had to pay to attend, but soon became a government, a DOE if you like, a government school. And by 1956, not only had there been a number of primary schools opened, but you also had the first secondary school opened, Ysgol Glan Clwyd, to be followed again shortly by a number of other secondary or higher schools or middle schools, as you might know them. And you began to challenge, there was a clear sign of challenging the decline, and we spoke a little about how the civil rights movement in the US impacted on discussions about the rights of Hawaiian and how we could revive Hawaiian language. Something similar happened in Wales. In the 60s, there was a famous lecture by Professor Saunders Lewis, Tynged yr Iaith, which said that if current trends continue, the Welsh language would be dead by the end of the 20th century. I'm pleased to say he was wrong. I'm pleased to say the current trends didn't continue. And over time, you saw a number of societies grow, activism, civil society activism to challenge this, and more power accorded to the Welsh level with the Welsh Assembly. And what you also saw was a significant growth of using Welsh in education. Now, if you think back to those graphs I showed you a few moments ago, it didn't come about by chance. It came about by people, us, trying to change things, but it also came about by clear government action. In 1990, Welsh became a compulsory subject for all pupils in Wales. Yeah? Every single pupil in Wales had to learn Welsh at school. By 1999, it became a compulsory subject for all pupils up to the age of 16. Now, in our education group, we can maybe discuss some of the challenges with that, some of the issues around teacher training, some of the issues about ensuring that those pupils learning Welsh in schools were leaving schools with a proficiency to be able to talk Welsh, but that made a huge difference. And then we have these things called Welsh in Education Strategic Plans introduced. So what happens here is every municipal authority has to plan the growth of Welsh medium education. Yeah? So there is a legal responsibility on every state, on every municipality in Wales to plan for the growth of Welsh medium education and to put a plan in place. And what you've seen, You have strategies, you have plans, and there is a growth. There is significant growth going on. And the government, the Welsh Government, has set out a strategy now. Think back to what I said at the beginning. We have 500,000 Welsh speakers. The government has set out a plan that we should have 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. Yeah? That's the very ambitious aim, and we're very pleased to hear that. It's going to take a heck of a lot of work. And this is where, in part, my day job comes in. So what we want to do, yeah, this is the challenge. If you want to get to 1 million Welsh speakers, you've got to make sure that all of those people, all of those children who are now being taught in Welsh, become Welsh-speaking adults and use Welsh when they leave school. Yeah? And there are two aspects to that. One is the further and higher education system, and the other is employment and life and community. And I'll say a few words about employment and life and community. And one other thing I think it's really important for us to think about. We brought that about by targeting everyone at the school age, yeah? It's not sort of native Welsh people, it's not ethnic Welsh people, it is everyone in Wales. This is my, one of my favourite examples of some marketing material. This is an 8-page marketing leaflet from our Pwnan Analeo, Mudiad Meithrin, in 8 languages. In Arabic, in Somali, in Polish, in the community languages that are spoken across Wales. Welsh is a language that is open to all, and for us to have a future, we try and bring everyone into that future who lives in Wales. So, let me turn, throwing the leaflet around, let me turn to higher and further education rather more briefly, but I can talk, this is, if you like, the day job. This is the one part of my life that actually pays me money to do it, rather than the many other activist roles I have. But what we have in higher education is you had a demand from the schools. You had all these children being taught in Welsh, but then in our universities, there were not the courses available for them to study. Yeah? And when I say courses, we're not talking about courses only in Hawaiian or in Welsh or in Maori or in other languages. What we're talking about is courses in business, in nursing, in engineering, in maths, right across the universities. So this was our aim to develop, and this is why the Coleg Cymraeg Cenedlaethol was established, to develop Welsh in higher education institutions. We had an awful lot of challenges, yeah? So you have a university system that is principally an English language system, apart from some magnificent departments of Welsh and Welsh studies, but principally an English language system. So we then want to develop significantly these universities. So what are the challenges? One, getting the staff. If people haven't studied their degrees in Welsh, how are you going to recruit them to be university lecturers to teach in Welsh? There's a real challenge there about staff development and growth and PhD programs and bringing people together. So who are the people that are going to deliver your strategy? How are the universities going to react when you turn up and say to them, well, actually, you're going to have to do a lot of different things now. You're going to have to change the way you operate. And then, even if you've got the staff and you persuade the universities to make a difference, what about students themselves? Is it going to be cool to study in Welsh? Is it going to be the most exciting thing? Or are they going to go off and sort of meet friends and colleagues from around the world studying in English? Yeah? How do you get that student learner demand? And what are the marketing and the messages for those students? And then the last point is, do you simply take political philosophy in English, translate the lectures and deliver them in Welsh? Or do you develop a Welsh curriculum? And that was one of the really powerful things for me this morning in the Navahi school, was listening to the development of a genuinely Hawaiian curriculum. Yeah? Very, very different perspective on the world, and that's a challenge. So, briefly, a few things we've done. Thankfully, we managed to persuade the government to give us some money So we've invested over £18 million. That's sort of probably 25 million US dollars in different universities in developing Welsh medium education. We've appointed over 100 lecturers to teach across a range of subjects through the medium of Welsh. We've invested over £1 million in scholarships to students. So you're incentivizing students, you're supporting staff, and you're investing in universities. And what you've then seen is a significant growth in student numbers. The different colours are universities. Most of them you probably won't have heard of the universities, but what it shows is that there's been a clear and consistent growth in the number of students studying in Welsh. But I want to say something else about that, which I think makes it even more exciting. The growth has been principally in new subject areas, and if you can read that, you've got better eyes than me. Oh, no, it's pretty good. In new subject areas, but I'll give you a flavour. Medicine, nursing, biology, environmental sciences, mathematics, computing, engineering, law, history, creative industries, mass communication. New subject areas that were barely offered at all or not offered at all in Welsh that are now being delivered in Welsh. So for me, if you establish a right for students to be able to study in their native language, that right can't be, oh, you have to do Welsh language studies, or you have to do poetry, or you have to do music. That right should apply in law, in medicine, in nursing, in whatever subject area, and I think that's an important message we've taken. Finally, on that further education and higher education, we've also moved into the college sector, and I can answer questions about these later on too. We've also moved into the colleges sector, which is more vocational education, and pupils who may not be more academic. I'm not entirely sure what the pattern is in the US, but in the UK, those pupils who get good academic grades will go to university. Those who may have less academic grades but may have a great future in the professions, in technical vocation, will go to a technical college. So what we've done here is we've developed a plan for further education and apprenticeships. And again, we look at all learners here. There are 50,000 students in these sectors every year in Wales. And what we want to say to them is, everyone can do some Welsh. Yeah? Whatever level you're at, you can be aware of the Welsh language. You can be able to pronounce words correctly. You can be able to pronounce names correctly. How many of us have had our names mispronounced when dealing with public bodies? You can develop understanding. You can deal with people in simple terms and in simple sentences. That can make an enormous difference. If you're in a hospital and ill and scared, and somebody just holds your hand and says, "Wyt ti eisiau paned o de? Do you want a cup of tea?" It's not much, but it makes a world of difference to a patient. Loads of people who can understand things need a bit of confidence. How do we grow people's confidence? And those who are confident, how do you develop their proficiency so that they are fluent? So that's the plan, and that's my new work for the next 5 years. I've been principally focused on universities for the last 6 years. And now we're moving into the colleges and professional education sectors. But I think there are a number of lessons I'd like to draw out to share with you and to think about as we move forward in this International Year of Languages. One, none of this is easy. Yeah, I mean, we know this, yeah? But none of this is easy, and building that resilience, stubbornness, whatever you want to call it, is what we as a community and a community of communities need to do. Building on that resilience, you need your change agents, you need your people with a passion who can change things, who can literally change the world. Because if you can do that, and you could see it in the teachers today, yeah? And how they were changing people's lives on a day-by-day basis. I see it in the primary school that I'm chair of, and we've got 178 pupils now, and you can see people gaining confidence in their Welsh language skills every day. So it's people with a passion. But passion is great. It needs to be built into a strategy. Yeah? However well resourced we are, we're not going to be able to do everything all of the time. And therefore having a really careful view as to what the strategic priorities are, and then focusing on them and going after them and doing that well is a lesson that I've learned. I mean, we've done many projects, and sometimes you have to take a big step back and a big breath and say, actually, is that really making a difference? Could we do that better? And there's also got to be a bit of confidence to say, actually, that didn't work. But that's fine. We're trying to do something spectacular here. We're trying to reverse centuries of language decline. Some things aren't going to work, but we're going to be confident enough and we're going to be resilient enough to say, okay, we're going to look again and we're going to plan and we're going to think and we're going to do this. Built into the strategy, you need the resources to deliver, government resources, people resources, electronic resources, whatever form of resources you can find, bring them all in. But the last point I'd like to make, and I'll conclude with this, is how to change the world. I think for me, language planning, changing the world in education is down to people. And what I've found is you'd have thought, oh, the universities were doing nothing in Welsh. They'd all be hostile. Actually, they weren't. There were some people who were really positive. Work with them, find them, they are your allies. There were others who were quite neutral. Yeah? They had big departments to run, they had big sort of problems on their hands, but if you could offer them a solution, they'd be more than willing to work with you. And then there were a small band that were hostile. But by and large, you had this great opportunity of allies and people who are neutral to work with. So for me, the biggest take-home, if you like, is to change the world. You need to work with those people. You need to listen to them and build that strategy. And if we all do that, then that nightmarish vision of that professor in South Korea of only 2 languages will be consigned to the dustbin of history where it belongs. Because our diversity as a globe is built on those 6,000 and 7,000 languages that we all speak. It enriches us, it creates enormous value to the planet. And if we lose one of them, it would be a disaster. That's what motivates me, that's what motivates us. And I'm very pleased to share our story from Wales with you and to listen to your stories. Diolch yn fawr iawn.